Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. MashaAllah, welcome to everybody who's here. I'm really honored, inshallah, to serve as the host for today. Inshallah, all of you are welcomed, alhamdulillah, to join us for this event and also for other upcoming events. Usually with the Stanford MSU Muslim Student Union, we have a Thursday halaqah, a gathering, a healing circle, and discussions that happen weekly, mashallah. And this particular moment in time and this particular era, subhanAllah, really requires other voices other than who we have typically right now at the university. And so I really wanted to invite my own teacher, Imam Zaid Shakir, and my own dear sister and colleague, Dr. Jamila Karim, who I'm going to be introducing both of them to you shortly, inshallah, to really share with us words of healing, words of wisdom, words of reflection in the current moment that we're in, and also have our students share with us how they've been feeling, and have our dear scholars respond to that, inshallah. So with that, inshallah, I realize I did not introduce myself for those who don't know me and I might be new to you. My name is Rania Awad. I'm a assistant, actually now associate professor, changes very quickly, alhamdulillah, associate professor at the university here at Stanford University in the Department of Psychiatry in the School of Medicine, and run the healing circles for the Muslim students on campus, as well as the halaqas. Also, just in the community, just briefly, considering that we're talking about a healing circle, a lot of the work that I do relates to Muslim mental health and integrating Islamic psychology and Islamic spirituality into the healing and therapy process. So that's the frame I'm coming from, inshallah. And with that, the idea of a healing circle, in case you're new to that concept as well, we're going to be doing some words of reflection from Imam Zaid and from Dr. Jamila, and then we're going to ask the students to actually share with us how they're feeling, what's happening, and I really want to make sure that we're giving a specific priority to our students, inshallah, to discuss how they've been feeling and the frustrations they've been undergoing, and reflections in general, and have our scholars respond to that. So with that, inshallah, I'm going to share with you a little bit about who our scholars are. Imam Zaid Shakir, mashallah, needs no introduction. Alhamdulillah, the people's Imam, mashallah. Of course, our dear teacher and probably teacher to many of you here as well. He is the co-founder of Zaytuna College and one of its core faculty, of course, members, and somebody who has been on the ground doing work and activism relating to the Muslim community for decades, mashallah. And as I said, a name that all of you know and needs no actual introduction, mashallah. I also want to introduce to you Dr. Jamila Karim, mashallah, who I'm really excited to have here as well. And she is an award-winning author, speaker, blogger who specializes on the intersection between race, gender, and Islam. And she's got some really important books that I want you to know about. One called Woman of the Nation, Between Black Protest and Sunni Islam. Also American Muslim Woman, Negotiating Race, Class, Gender Within the Ummah. And was awarded a 2008 Book Award in Social Sciences by the Association of Asian American Studies, mashallah. Currently she's working on a new book called Radical Love, which I hope we'll hear a little bit about, which is exploring the depth of beauty and the beauty of the divine and human love. And she's a regular blogger on Sapelo Square, Hagar Lives, Race, Gender, Faith, and the NYU Press blog, Huffington Post Religion, and speaks regularly on college campuses, Muslim conferences across the nation. 2014, her scholarly activism was recognized by Jet Magazine, which featured her as a young faith leader in the African American community. And she's a former associate professor in the Department of Religious Studies at Spelman College, and holds a BSc in electrical engineering and a PhD in Islamic Studies from Duke University, mashallah. So we're really excited and really honored to have our dear teachers and scholars with us. So first, as I mentioned, I'd like for each of them to share some words of wisdom with the rest of us, inshallah. Imam Zaid, Bismillah, please join us, inshallah, with your words of reflection. Thank you. I think your students, you might need to unmute our dear speakers, inshallah, so we can all benefit from their wisdom.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidil Mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, it's a great honor to be here with all of the wonderful brothers and sisters who have assembled Dr. Rania, Dr. Jamila, and all of the support people, Sister Anika and Brother Hamza. I'm sure there are many others. Their names are on the screen, so I can read those. May Allah Ta'ala bless you. This is a very unique moment in the history of our country. Not only unique in a number of ways. It's not unique in that an unarmed African-American man was killed. It happens to many African-American men. It happens to many African-American women who died either in police custody or visibly and directly at the hands of the police. They had the case, the Breonna Taylor case recently, Rakaya Boyd, Ayanna Jones, 8 years old in Detroit, Michigan, the police shot up her house and she caught a bullet, and she's a young, beautiful life is snuffed out. And we could add so many to that list. Most of the men, their names are well known. Even more recently, the Ahmaud Arbery jogging in the street, jogging while black, or of course, Greg Floyd, or Alton Sterling, in Oakland, Oscar Grant, Alan Bluford, Gary King. The list is very long. In New York City, Sean Bell, Ramari Graham, of course, Eric Garner, strangled, not in the exact same way as Greg Floyd, but the same result. I can't breathe. Ahmadou Diallo, our Muslim brother from Guinea, Fouta Djallon, reaching into his pockets to grab his keys to open the door of his apartment, unsuspecting that an undercover police unit would, for that simple act, put 41 bullets in his body. Greg Floyd buying food during a pandemic with record amounts of unemployment, 45 million people unemployed in a little over 1 month, with a counterfeit bill, and the sentence, death. So this is very common, and is disproportionately affects African Americans. Some people ask why all the emphasis on African American, other people are killed by police, and it's true. And we want to emphasize this, lest someone goes off on a tangent and says, I'm dismissing the reality of the situation. If you're African American, you're twice as likely to be killed by police as a European American. If you're African American and unarmed, you're 4 to 5 times more likely to be killed by police. So this is a racially informed reality, but it's also a wider societal reality. In raw numbers, twice as many European Americans are killed by police every year than African Americans. On the day that, or the week rather, that Alton Sterling in Louisiana and Fernando Castillo, also up there in Minneapolis, were killed. 5 Latinos were killed by police during that same week in Nevada, California, and Arizona. So this is a pervasive problem that's as unique to this place as cherry pie. It's as American as cherry pie. But some ask, why the emphasis on African Americans? We mentioned in another forum earlier this week, the country has placed that emphasis, not the African American community. At the founding of the country, it was African Americans, no one else who were deemed to be 3/5 of a man. And that was for congressional representation to enhance the political power of Southern slave-owning states, and also to give them a carrot to encourage them and induce them to join the Union in the first place. Half a century after that, a civil war was fought over the issue of the enslavement of African people. So it's the country and its history Half a century, a little less than half a century after that, it was 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, legalizing discrimination against African American people, specifically Plessy versus Ferguson. A couple years after that, one of our greatest, if not our greatest, African American intellectual, W.E.B. Du Bois, said the problem of the century would be the problem of the color line. And on one side of that color line was the African American community. Half a century after that, Brown versus the Board of Education, 1954, was trying to wrestle with the issue of segregation as it relates to the African American community. A decade after that, cities were burning down. Watts, LA, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Northern Hartford, Connecticut, Detroit, Newark, New Jersey, Cleveland, Ohio, and we can spend the rest of my time naming these cities. But what were those riots called? They were called race riots. They were called race riots. And who was on one side of that racial divide? Not by choice, but because the history and the reality of the country have placed us on one side of that divide, the African American community. When Hillary Clinton was a couple decades after that talking about super predators and working with her husband to enact the omnibus crime bill. Who was it primarily targeting? What did she mean by super predators? Young African-American men. Who was the omnibus crime bill and the regime of mass incarceration that it helped to usher in primarily affect the African-American community? Stop and frisk in New York, African-American and Latino communities specifically targeted. And so the entire history of the country leads to this emphasis on the condition, the oppression, the unequal status before the law of the African American community. That's the history of the country. That's not some activist trying to call attention to an imaginary problem. So the weight of history is one of the things that makes this moment so weighty. The weight of history. And then the reality of someone who no one can argue. Someone can say in Stephon Clark, we thought he had a gun. It happened so fast. Not to excuse the inexcusable. And to use that as a model, after Stephon Clark was killed, was a Muslim, by the way, but he wasn't killed because he was a Muslim. He was young, a new Muslim, struggling to find his way in the faith. But after that, the community mobilized, and it's resulted in the changing of the use of force laws in the state of Connecticut. That's what we want to see now. We want to see the laws changed. But why has this moment resonated? You see in the streets, you see white folks, or should I say European American folks, we see African American folks, we see Latino folks, we see all kinds of people who are touched. We see people who never gone to a demonstration in their life feeling I must go out because the brutality of a life. Well, you can't argue. The cop, he saw a flash. He thought it was a gun and it was a soda can. That's when a young man in my community, when I was still in high school, Miguel Arroyo, was killed by the police on Christmas Eve, running away from the police. And the policeman, who was never tried, didn't spend a day in jail, said, oh, I thought he had a gun. That gun turned out to be a soda can. So in any case, and the young man was 14 or 15 years old. Why does this rise? Because that excuse is not there. Almost 9 minutes of just slowly and casually, hand in the pocket, smirk on the face, strangling and snuffing the life out of a handcuffed individual. The excuse isn't there. I thought he had a gun. No, you know he didn't have a gun. I thought he lunged towards us. No, he wasn't in a position. He was flat on his stomach with his hands cuffed behind his back. So no, the usual array of excuses are unavailable. And so the country and the world can see the stark brutality that so many people are dealing with. Right there on the computer screen or their television set. And that touched people. That touched people deeply because it is inexcusable. The optics of it too closely resembled a safari hunter casually posing with the rhinoceros that he just shot, or the zebra, or whatever. And it touched people, and it moved people. And we have to take advantage of this moment. We have to take advantage of this moment to begin to look at each other through more human lenses. We have to get beyond these dichotomies of black and white. I try to avoid that because black people and white people are unique American invention. There are no white people in Europe. There are Scots and Celts and Franks and Anglos and Saxons and Swedes and Danes. And there are no black people in Africa. The Wolof, Bambara, Mandinka, Tuareg, Berber. This was invented in this country. And it was invented in the context of initiating a realm, a reign, a regime of white supremacy. But when we talk about white supremacy and whatever anyone might say or has said, I'm not trying to argue against that or negate that, but I want to add something that's usually not discussed. White supremacy emerged in the aftermath of Bacon's rebellion in 1675, where a disgruntled plantation owner, Mr. Bacon, rallied his European slaves, this is before America, 1675, his European slaves and his African slaves to overthrow the system that denied him access to the halls of privilege enjoyed by other plantation owners. And those other plantation owners responded by putting a wedge between the Africans and the Europeans. In other words, white supremacy was initially developed to break the possibility of transracial solidarity against the common oppressive system. And yes, it evolved into a regime of dehumanization. So I'm not denying that, but we should never forget what its original purpose was. And whenever that possibility of transracial solidarity emerges, this trump card has been rolled out every time. And there are those who would like to see it rolled out right now. And we have to resist that. We have to resist that. We have to not allow the pain that we feel, especially young people. I have cousins, I have nephews and nieces who are organizing protests. My niece organized a protest in Hartford, Connecticut. Tomorrow, there's a protest in New Haven, Connecticut that another niece has helped to organize. I have a nephew who is very active in this regard. Why these young people? These young people are feeling pain. They're feeling pain. And it's a blessing they're translating that pain into positive action. And so we have to build on that. I'll say in conclusion that as a Muslim, I firmly believe part of the solution to this problem, and I'll repeat what Malcolm said in his letter from Mecca, what Arnold Toynbee said, both in his study of civilization in one form and then in an essay, Islam and the West, that Islam has always had the ability, despite its shortcomings, Islam as lived by people, to address the issue of race. And Toynbee says that Islam can offer the West a solution to the problem of race. And he also says alcoholism and by extension, drug addiction. Malcolm X from Mecca said, perhaps if white people in America could become Muslim, it could remove the scourge of racism from their hearts as it removed the scourge of racism from the hearts of all these Muslims I'm meeting whose eyes are the bluest of blue, whose hair is the blondest of blonde, whose skin is the whitest of white, but they don't have that attitude of superiority embedded within their being. And so I think as Muslims, we have work to do, not only in maintaining those bonds of solidarity with others, but also having the confidence after we've internalized it within ourselves and then done everything in our power to internalize the reality of anti-racism in our communities, to have the confidence we have something to offer our society that's unique and untried. Because this long history we mentioned, it's gone on for too long. So may we all be able to contribute in unique and in common ways to come together. None of us have the critical mass. African Americans are not going to be able to solve this problem alone. If we had that power, then under the leadership of someone as brilliant, dynamic, and as faithful as Dr. King, we would have done it. If we had that power under the leadership of someone as dynamic and courageous and visionary as Malcolm X, we would have done it. If we had that power, Du Bois would not have quit America for Africa. We don't have the power in and of ourselves. But if we join together and we build bridges of solidarity with communities that are also suffering, if you have a stomach for police killings, and I don't usually encourage watching these films, I don't even know if they're permissible to watch, but I will say this, if you have a stomach for police killings, then you go online and watch the execution of Daniel Shaver, a young European American man killed by a policeman, the murder caught on a body camera. And if you're not left in tears, just as George Floyd left you in tears, and I'm not trying to draw an equivalence because I specifically mentioned the disproportionate degree to which African Americans suffer from this problem, but just to say that it's a problem that affects us all. And so we have to come together across racial lines to deal with this racially rooted problem. So I apologize if I went over my time. May Allah Ta'ala, Almighty God, bless everybody. And I look forward to hearing from our wonderful, beautiful, courageous, visionary students. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, our dear Imam Zaid, our teacher and our mentor in so much, mashallah. Your words are really important, and I think they pierce that kind of heart and the space that we need at this moment, inshallah. So, dear students, inshallah, we're going to transition to Dr. Jamila Karim, who I've introduced prior, mashallah, and would really love to hear from her as well, words of reflection before we move to this third part of our discussion, which, just for those of you who are joining us, welcome to our Stanford Muslim Student Union halaqah that we normally have weekly on Thursdays, because after this section, inshallah, we're going to ask our students, and priority here will be for our African American and Black students, inshallah, to speak first and really share with us, and then our dear scholars will respond to their comments. Dr. Jamila, welcome. We're really happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anya. I'm very happy to be here. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Imam Zaid talked about the pain that we are feeling. Indeed, we are heartbroken. But I urge us to remember that the wound is where the light enters. A Rumi quote. The heartbreak is the opening for Allah's mercy, for his light, for his justice, for his love, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Yunus, ayah 57, what translates as, "O humanity, there has come to you instruction from your Lord, and healing for what is in the breast, and guidance and mercy for the believers." Indeed, there would arrive no warning except that there is a grave matter at hand. There would arrive no healing except that there is deep pain. There would arrive no guidance except that there is confusion. And there would arrive no mercy except that there is unbearable horror. The urgent question that we have been asking ourselves since the horrific murder of our brother George Floyd and the murder of our sister Breonna Taylor and our brother Ahmaud Arbery and the countless others, many of whom Imam Zaid named, and inshallah we'll continue naming them, and all the others outside of this space. The urgent question that we have been asking is, what do we do? How do we affect change? And as we know, our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that whoever among you sees an evil, let him change it with his hand. And if he cannot, then change it with his tongue. And if he cannot, then change it with his heart. And indeed, that is the weakest of faith. So to change it only with the heart is the weakest of faith. But truly, the heart is where the work begins. Because how can I speak out against something without heart, without compassion, without courage, without love? Similarly, how can I do something directly with my hands without heart, without love? So this is the work that I see before us. It is hard work. And the story of my people is a story of heartbreak, but it is also the story of radical love, the kind of love that comes out of heartbreak and out of loss and pain. Our beloved Prophet, he commanded us, he said, love for humanity what you love for yourself. And he also said, none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. So loving your brother, loving your sister, this is the highest faith. Because when you love, you carry out the remarkable and you achieve the unthinkable. So what I would say is that what we must do is love. Our Prophet already modeled that for us. It's very clear that we must love people. I come from a community that taught me to love my people deeply. A community of people that at one time didn't love the color of their skin or the fullness of their features. A community of people that were stirred by Malcolm X when he pushed and posed, who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? And I come from a community of people who, inspired by these words, joined the movement, and I'm talking about the Nation of Islam, And they did it as an act of self-love, as an act of freedom and liberation and justice and active resistance. And all the while, these were people moving on a divine path. Indeed, their resistance was divine because God never told them to hate themselves. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted them to know the truth, not just that they were beautiful, but that Allah made them beautiful. And so I come from a community of people who were given this truth through the Quran, through Imam Wardi Muhammad, the son of Elijah Muhammad, who actually read the Quran from cover to cover in 1962. He began resisting his father's teachings as early as the 1950s and late 1950s and 60s. And so without a doubt, when he read the Quran, he discovered in it a warning, a healing, a guidance, and a mercy. And indeed, he read the verse that says, and this is speaking about Allah, and he formed you and made your forms beautiful. Also, I come from a home where my parents were still fighting to liberate our bodies and our minds. I remember when my father cried to his daughters, "But baby, your hair is beautiful." We didn't realize it then, but our father was speaking divine words to little girls who lived in a world still full of lies, to girls who were still immediately affected by systemic racism in our everyday lives. And that's why my mother, may Allah have mercy on her, in the early 1980s, she used every cent that she earned, and she was in school and working part-time, but she used every dollar to send us to Sister Clara Muhammad School. And there we memorized the Quran, but also we memorized the poetry that came out of our struggle. One poem I memorized, I want to share a couple of stanzas. For My People by Margaret Walker. For my people everywhere, singing their slave songs repeatedly, their dirges and their ditties and their blues and jubilees, praying their prayers nightly to an unknown God, bending their knees humbly to an unseen power. For my people, lending their strength to the years, to the gone years and the now years and the maybe years, washing, ironing, cooking, scrubbing, sewing, mending, hoeing, plowing, digging, planting, pruning, patching, dragging along, never gaining, never reaping, never knowing, and never understanding. For the cramped, bewildered years, we went to school to learn to know the reasons why, and the answers to, and the people who, and the places where, and the days when, in memory of the bitter hours when we discovered we were Black and poor, and small and different, and nobody cared, and nobody wondered, and nobody understood. And so she has many stanzas, so I'm going to skip to the last one. Let a new earth rise, let another world be born, let a bloody peace be written in the sky, let a second generation full of courage issue forth, let a people loving freedom come to growth, let a beauty full of healing and a strength of final clenching be the pulsing in our spirits and our blood. Let the martial songs be written, let the dirges disappear, let a race of men now rise and take control. And so through this memorization of poetry and learning our history and just reading our literature, this love for our people was certainly inscribed in our hearts. Indeed, we read the likes of Edgar Allan Poe, Robert Frost, a little bit of Shakespeare, Jane Austen, but I would say the vast majority of what we read was Langston Hughes, Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston, Richard Wright, James Baldwin, Maya Angelou, W.E.B. Du Bois. And so I say those names because those names are really full of so much of the richness of our struggle. They have imparted so much of it through their writings. And I also share because I think that's where revolution begins. It begins where revelation began, with Iqra, read in the name of your Lord who created. And so I want us to be radical in this way. Consider for the next 12 months, be like me or how I was in high school. I attended Sister Clara Muhammad School in the Warthi Muhammad High up until my senior year, or I graduated from there. And so I would say that 75% of what we read was Black literature. So consider doing that as one way to love and to love radically. I'll end with a statement that I found about radical love online, and it's by Lewis Gordon, an African-American philosopher. He said, "Love those whom the systems of hatred deem worthless, except as cheap labor, property, or moments of base pleasure. Radicalize that love. Don't only love them, but also love being loved by them. Value bringing value to and receiving value from those whom oppression claims lack value. Embody freedom through not only writing what one likes, as the martyred revolutionary Black physician and philosopher Stephen Bantu Biko declared, but also loving each other with fierce defiance." And so I love that term or phrase, to love with fierce defiance. And for me, that translates as a higher love. It translates as ihsan. It translates as excellence and beauty, love for the sake of Allah, love against all odds. It also makes me think of a line by Toni Morrison when she said, "Love is or it ain't, then love ain't love at all." So it's this higher love that we have to be called to. And that love, I've talked about in most of my work. I didn't call it that, but I see that love as the beloved community. And so my first book looks at relations between African Americans and South Asian Muslims. And as Imam Zaid alluded to, I also highlight, or as he spoke about, I also highlight that the way that we as a community are uniquely positioned to fight racism in this community, in this society, makes us the beloved community. And because to come together, because we are divided by structural racism, right? The racism in the larger society does impact us. We live in different neighborhoods. We go to different schools for the most part. We attend different masajid for the most part. So if we actually come together, then we will be defying those racial structures and those patterns that keep us divided. And so, alhamdulillah, this is a manifestation of, again, that unique position that we have to really, seize the moment, as Imam Zaid said, that we are, again, specially positioned to do that. And so may Allah make us the beloved community that Dr. King talked about, but really that our beloved Prophet ﷺ, that he modeled for us. Ameen.
Ameen. Barakallahu fiki, Dr. Jamila. MashaAllah, as your name implies, beautiful, mashallah, words of wisdom and beautiful lines of poetry that eases the heart and really, gives a salve to the heart that's so needed at this moment, subhanAllah. MashaAllah, thank you both, Imam Zaid and Dr. Jamila. I'm really, again, really honored to have you with us in our Stanford Muslim Union halaqah and space that we normally share on a Thursday evening.